Hey everyone, Michael Park here for CreativeCow.net, and in this project I've got mad cow disease. That's right, we're going bad to the bovine. It's going to be like having a heifer with a howitzer, a bull with a bazooka, a longhorn with a laser, a Holstein with a hand grenade. I'd probably better stop there. Anyway, enough with the bad jokes, let's go ahead and get started. First thing we need to do is to import our footage files, so double click the project window and navigate to this project and grab the AE logo and open it up. This is an Illustrator file, so you can just choose the merge layers and click OK. The next thing we need to do is set up our composition where we're going to put everything, so let's go ahead to the menu and choose Composition, New Composition. We'll call this Final Comp. And let's use the 720p 25 frames per second preset, make it 8 seconds long, and click OK. Next thing we want to do is create another new composition to put our background layer in. So from the menu, choose Composition, New Composition. Keep everything the same, but just let's put cow background and click OK. And to this layer, we want to add our logo. And we're going to do, a couple quick things with the logo. Let's duplicate it first. And this top layer we're going to use as outline, and the bottom we're going to use as fields. And to this outline we're going to key out everything but the black. So we're going to go to the effect panel and choose keying, Luma key, and instead of key out darker, let's key out brighter and turn this switch off so you can see what happened. And basically that keyed out everything that wasn't black. And if we zoom in, you'll see that it's kind of pixely. So let's go ahead and just feather those edges by 1 just to kind of blend that all a bit. And then what we're going to use is layer styles. Now what I want to do is put in a gradient here over top the cow to make it look kind of metallic or chromy. The problem is if I go to the usual effect, which is generate ramp, it only gives me 2 color choices, and really I want a whole lot more than that to get that that chrome look. There's a couple different ways that you can cheat this. One of them is to go add the colorama effect to this. So go Effect, Color Correction, Colorama, and basically what this will do is allow you to remap the black and white that you just created to whatever you want on your output cycle. And this is something that I do quite frequently when I need to, and it works pretty well. But there's an easier way to do this than to have 2 separate effects applied. This can be handy because you can animate all this stuff, but we really don't need to do that for this. So let's go a little easier, and the way I'm going to use is layer styles. So with the layer selected, choose Layer, Layer Styles, and let's use a gradient overlay. Now if we twirl down the gradient overlay properties, we can hit the edit gradient, and we have this line here that we can adjust and put as many different colors in as we want, which is great, and be very specific about where they are, and also control their opacity. So actually a little more control than ramp gives you, and even colorama with not as much drama. So let's go ahead and alter some of these settings. I want kind of a steely blue-gray look, so we're just going to kind of mess around with some of these. This one I think I want to be a little bit lighter. We'll use that as the middle reflection. A little lighter here, maybe a little deeper blue here. This one maybe a little bit darker. Okay, and choose OK. Next thing we want to do is switch this from linear to reflected. So now we kind of have a somewhat of a chromy look. I'm quite happy with it. All right. So now let's make this look a little more three-dimensional. So let's choose Layer, Layer Style. We'll grab the old Bevel and Emboss. And I don't think we really need to mess with the settings too much because I think that'll be fine for our purposes. Next, let's turn our attention to the fields. And if we pop this back on, you can see that we did this nice kind of a metallic chromy looking frame here, and it looks like this stuff is recessed and painted. You could leave it with the colors as is, that'd be perfectly fine, or you could recolor it any way you want. You can go monochromatic if you want by going Effect, Color Correction, CC Toner, and that will basically recolor everything but leave the different variations in luminance. So if you want to go, all in the same family, you can go with kind of a blue, steely blue color, and I think it looks quite nice. We'll just leave it at that. But you could change this whole thing to red if you want to, or anything else. So looks pretty good. We need to put in a white background here. So go Layer, New, Solid. We'll call this White Background. Make sure it's comp size and make it white. Click OK. Drop it below everything, and let's add our text, our bad to the bovine text. I'm going to use simple Arial bold 70 pixels and type bad to the bovine, and let's make bovine a little bit bigger. There we go. 90 looks, oh, what? There we go. 92 then looks pretty good. And let's grab this, move it over here towards the middle, take off the caps lock. And one of the cool things about the layer styles is you can just literally copy and paste them from one to another. So under your outline, select your layer styles, hit Control C, grab or highlight the bad of the bovine text, hit Control V, and now you've got the same kind of stylistic application on that. Let's rotate our text a little bit, like so. And the other cool thing about the layer style is, get rid of this. You can see that it applies everything horizontally, and so it kind of stays with the coloring that we have up and down. If you wanted to make it all go horizontal, you could pre-compose it or do something like that. I kind of like this look, so we'll go with that. All right, so we got our background set up. Next, it's time to put this all together in the final comp. So let's grab our cow background and drop it into the final composition. Like always, I'm going to try to keep these things clean in here, so let's go with a texture file and drop our texture in, and let's go with a pre-comp file and drop our pre-comp in. And really, I should probably name this pre-comp. It's just better to keep everything straight. I think, at least. It's good practice, especially when you have like hundreds of layers, which I've done that before, and searching around to find the right layer can be a pain if you don't name them right. Okay, let's go ahead and set up some of our particles. So let's go Layer. Whoops, we need to be in the final comp. Layer, New, Solid, and we'll call this particular holes. There we go. Let's make this black. Choose OK. Make sure it's comp size. Click OK. All right, and to this we're going to need to add our particle effect. So choose Effect, Trapcode, Particular. So now we've got our standard little white dots spreading around. Not really what we're going for yet, but just bear with me. I think the next thing we need to do is set up a layer that we're going to use to shoot the particles against. And in this tutorial, we're going to be using the bounce physics from Particular, not the air physics. And I don't know if you guys have used these before, but pretty cool. What you can do is make the particles interact with any 3D layer at all, and actually up to two 3D layers, a floor layer and a wall layer. Doesn't matter what orientation they're in. The wall doesn't have to be up and down. The floor doesn't have to be horizontal. Any orientation you want, and they can either bounce off of them, stick, die when they hit them. So we're going to be using those attributes to create this effect. Another thing we need to make are the actual bullet holes themselves, and we'll get to that in a second. But let's go ahead and create that wall layer. So let's choose Layer, New, Solid. We'll call this Wall. And make sure it's comp size and black, and click OK. Make this a 3D layer. Bring up its position, and we're just going to push it back in 3D space to about 300. Obviously, when you do that, you need to scale it up so it makes it the size of our comp or bigger. 118, 120 looks good. Let's go ahead and turn to our bullet holes themselves. So let's create a new composition. We'll call this bullet hole pre-comp or source. And we need to make it 200 by 200 would be fine. Duration doesn't need to be that long. 2 seconds will be fine. And click OK. Next we need a layer, new, solid, and we'll call this holes, and make it comp size and black and click OK. Next we need to add the circle effect to this, so choose Effect, Generate, Circle. And what that does is create a circle. Now the reason why we're doing it this way is I could make a layer and then, take the pen tool and make jiggly holes like, a raggedy bullet hole that went through paper or cardboard or a wall or something. But the problem is, if I wanted to make it change over time, I'd have to rotate it, or I'd actually have to animate the stroke path, and that's just way too much work. There's an easier way to do it, and I'm going to show you that right now. So we've got our circle here. I've got the toggle transparency on just to make sure that there is no black in the background, because we're going to use these in the next composition or in the final comp as a particle source, and I want them to be transparent, all but the holes here. So let's go ahead and make it all raggedy. So with the whole layer selected, choose Effect, Stylize, Roughen Edges. And if we toggle off the transparency, you can see what happened to the edges. It kind of roughened them up a bit. I think that's a good name for this particular effect. We can increase the border, and now it's real nice and raggedy, but I think that's a little too much detail for a bullet hole to go through at the resolution we'll be using. So what we need to do is dial down the scale, or shall I say dial up the scale. So we want these holes to be, raggedy, but with enough kind of odd shape to look like a bullet hole and not, just so much texture around the outside. I don't like the sharp edges on these as much. So what I'm going to do is take the edge sharpness and pull it back a little bit. And that way you get, kind of looks like there's light coming through, and these are edges which have been peeled out or peeled inward. So we take that back off. You see it's nothing more than a white image, transparent. But when we put it over a black background, it'll do the job. Finally, like I said, I want this to change over time. I don't want this to be the same image, so what we can do is Alt-click the stopwatch of the evolution, type time times a very high random value, 1892, and then if we do a quick RAM preview, you can see that every single frame is fairly different in shape but consistent in size, which is what we want. Alright, let's jump back to the final comp and grab our bullet hole source, drop it in. We can turn off the eyeball switch, and once again drop this into our pre-comp folder to keep it nice and tidy. And in the particular holes, we'll go up to particular and change a couple of these settings. I'll leave it at point. I want this to be directional. I want the directional spread to be 45, and we need to put the particles, or the wall, under the particles here, so they're shooting. Alright, a couple other changes. The velocity, I'm going to amp way up to 2000, and I know it looks a little weird right now, but bear with me. Velocity random was dialed down to 0, and velocity from motion, we don't need any of that. Let's adjust the particle settings so you can see what's going on a little bit. The size, let's bring up. That's a bit too big. 25 looks good. And let's go down to the physics and really show you what this tutorial is all about. We need to change the physics from air to bounce. And when we do that, we can come in here and change the wall layer or the floor layer from none to wall. And what this does now is all these particles shoot towards the wall in 3D space and then hit it and do whatever the collision event tells it. Right now we have it bouncing, so it's hitting and bouncing off. If we tell it to stick, then what will happen is these will all hit and they'll just stay there. Now you might think, wait a second, there's still stuff sliding around. Well, that's what it looks like, but what's actually happening is you have the emitter here as a point in space in front of your point of view or the camera, and it's shooting all these out at a 45-degree cone. So those things that look like they're shooting off at an angle when they hit are actually traveling to the background layer and then stopping. So that's what's going on. We need to change these spheres though from the spheres to our particles, custom particles we made. So under the particle settings, let's change the particle type from sphere to sprite, and we'll change the texture from layer to bullet hole source, and change the time sampling to random still frame. Now you can see we've got all of our little holes here. One of the problems that we're having though is that you still see all these holes flying at the background, and that's definitely not what we want. You have bullets flying, not holes, and we actually don't need the bullets. The illusion will be fine without actually having physically modeled bullets. So what we're going to do is use the auxiliary system and use those as the holes and just turn off the actual bullets flying at the screen altogether. So what we need to do is go down to the auxiliary system, and instead of emit off, put at bounce event. So these auxiliary particles will emit when the main particles or initial particles hit the wall. And type, you want to make sure it's same as main. You want it to emit 100% of the time that an initial particle strikes the layer. And you only need one particle per collision on this. And the life, let's turn up to 10 because we want them to stay on the entire time of the composition. So now you can see these little pieces, everywhere. And what we can do is bring those size up to, say, 30. And as you can see, they're only 50% opaque, and jack the opacity up, and that looks pretty good. We don't need any feathering. Drop that off. And now we can come back up here to the particles and change the size from 25 down to 0. So now, when we look at this, it just looks like there are bullets going faster than we can see and chewing up this, paper or wall or whatever layer to reveal what's underneath. Pretty good, except for I want the animation to kind of ramp up and then kind of stop. So we can do that by controlling the particles per second. So back up here, let's set a keyframe at 0 frames for particles per second. Drop that to 0. And then at about 5 seconds, let's make those particles per second 600. And then hit page down and make those particles per second back to 0. So now we've cleared a pretty good path for our background element, and that looks pretty good. Speaking of background element, let's go ahead and drop this, or bring the background element above the wall here. We don't really need it. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and what we're going to do is change the track matte from none to Luma matte particle holes. And so that gives you the illusion that you're firing at this piece of paper, and behind it is your logo, and you're revealing it as this thing gets fired at. And then by the time you hit 6 seconds, you've revealed most of it. This looks pretty good, but I think we can, amp it up just a little bit by adding some smoke element and also adding some, some light rays coming out of this. So let's go ahead and tackle that. First thing we need to do is duplicate this layer, and we're going to add a shine effect to this. So let's go ahead, turn it on and solo it. Turn on the background and choose Effect, Trapcode, Shine. Now if you don't have Shine, you should get it. It comes with Trapcode Suite, but there are other effects that I've discussed in prior tutorials that will help you out here. Or see the README file, and there's other ways to accomplish this type of effect without using Shine, but Shine's by far the easiest way to go about it. I don't want this colored red. I want it just white. So twirl down Colorize, and instead of 3-color gradient, just choose None. Now this is a bit bright right now, but it'll be okay. Let's rename this Smoke Luma, and we're going to use this as a Luma matte for a new smoke layer we'll make. So let's go ahead and make the smoke layer. Choose Layer, New, Solid, and we'll call this Smoke. Make sure it's comp size and click OK. And we'll turn off that and choose Effect, Noise and Grain, Fractal Noise, or if you have CS4 you can use Turbulent Noise. And let's change the fractal type to Dynamic and Spline. And this looks fairly smoky. I like it. Let's change the evolution by hitting Alt stopwatch and go time times 90 or so. And that'll basically just make this stuff, evolve over time, so it doesn't stay the same thing. And that's okay, but smoke kind of drifts. It never really stays in the same place because of, I don't know, it's lighter than air or something and moves. So I want it to kind of move from left to right. So the way we can accomplish that is twirl down the subsettings and come back to the first frame. And you see this sub offset here. What we can do is set a keyframe and leave it at 0. Then we can scrub all the way down to 8 seconds, and we can pull this down the x-axis a little bit to minus 400 or so. And now if you scrub through, you can see the smoke actually not only changes the evolution, but it actually moves from left to right, which is exactly what we want. So that's great. Let's hop back into our project here. And what we're going to do is drop this below the smoke luma layer and change the track matte from none to luma matte smoke luma. Now you can see we have kind of the smoke and these light rays, and if we pop this off, you see that's over top of everything. What we want to do is drag both of these below the cow background but above the wall layer, and it adds this kind of a smoke effect, which I think looks quite nice and gives you kind of a little more interest visually and a little more ambiance. The last thing I want to do is there's no light coming out of these holes, and I want it to really look like it's bright coming out from this background, and I think we need one more particular layer to do that. So let's grab the smoke luma layer, because we know that already has the particular applied to it, and I'm just going to duplicate that by hitting Control D. And let's drag that, or leave it where it is, turn it on, and you can see that it'll brighten things up quite a bit, and we need to tone that down a bit. So let's go into our shine settings, and let's change this shine opacity to something around 80%. And the way we can really control the brightness of shine is through the ray length. And if we shorten the ray length up, it'll really compact the light a bunch, which is what we want. Let's drop this down to something like 0.65, and you'll see that it really concentrates the light around the bullet holes, which I think is really what we want. So I think we're looking pretty good here. Let's do a quick RAM preview and see what we have. And after a quick RAM preview and the magic of television, here's what we got. I'm quite happy with it. I like the smoke coming across, and I think it's the effect we were going for. So other nice thing about this design, once again, it's modular. You can drop whatever design you want in the background. If you're not bad to the bovine, you can be bad to the whatever you want to be. Just change the cow BG pre-comp to whatever you want, and there you go. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial and this project, and I hope you make something really cool with it. And until next time, this is Michael Park for CreativeCow.net.